Will Giovanni Gio Palmieri assist Dante Falconeri and Lulu Spencer in finding their fugitive brother, Rocco Falconeri, who may disappear according to General Hospital spoilers? Rocco is prepared to ask Lulu more questions now that he's reeling from all of his Britt Westbourne inquiries. Lulu will have a difficult time explaining the complex birth narrative, but she will do her best to explain the stolen embryo predicament. Naturally, Lulu will reassure Rocco that it makes no difference how he was born. Rocco's biological ties and the extent of his family's love for him are unaffected by it. Dante will attempt to contact Rocco as well, since he will ultimately receive updates on his discoveries and concerns. Regretfully, Rocco will get irascible over this enormous secret that was withheld from him, and will feel estranged from his parents. All of this is leading up to Rocco's bold move in the episode airing on July 11th. We must think about what Rocco might do, since GH spoilers indicate that he will do something daring. Joe's entire life was upended when he learned of his adoption. When Gio ended up at that motel with Emma Scorpio Drake, he immediately wanted to run, and he did just that. Although Rocco's experience won't be precisely the same, he will also feel as though his entire world has been turned upside down. Rocco might end up running away and attempting to get his thoughts straightened out somewhere as a result. If so, when Rocco vanishes, Lulu can become very alarmed. Lulu and Dante might both be in a panic if Rocco doesn't arrive where he's meant to be. Gio should take the initiative at this point and maybe assist Dante in finding his half-brother. It's simple to picture Gio helping out with the desperate quest. Dante felt that Gio ought to have taken Rocco to the hospital immediately after the alcohol poisoning incident, so he snapped at him. If Gio saves Dante and gets him back together with Rocco, this might be his moment of salvation. Gio and Dante may finally start to connect as a result of this. Additionally, it would strengthen Joe's bond with Lulu, allowing them to begin to become a family. According to General Hospital spoilers, Brooke Lynn Quartermain's efforts are going to backfire horribly on her, regardless of how everything turns out. Stay in for all the bombshell news that will follow. According to General Hospital Weekly spoilers for July 7 to 11, 2025, Drew will continue to tell lies, Lulu will have to face some hard realities, and more. Rocco Falconeri has a lot of questions for his mother after inadvertently discovering the file with his birth story belonging to Brooke Lynn Quartermain. Britt Westbourne stole one of Lulu Spencer's frozen embryos and implanted it in herself to pose as her child with Patrick Drake, which Lulu Spencer is compelled to disclose to Rocco. While Lulu finds it hard to think Brooke Lynn allowed this to occur, Rocco finds it hard to believe this actually happened. She confronts Brooke Lynn, who defends herself, because she believes this was all done on purpose. Brooke Lynn didn't intend for Rocco to learn this way, just like Lulu did. Kind of just occurred. Fans of Drew is Back were given a relief since we were spared the sight of Drew Kane stalking around town in a threatening manner for an entire week. However, when he acquires influence on an adversary this week, he is once again acting eerily and sinisterly. We are confident that Willow Tate's cult-like mind will follow Drew's instructions despite his warnings. But Kai Taylor gives Curtis Ashford an update. Is Kai working with Drew, or is he part of Curtis' scheme to bring Drew down? He would better not harm Trina Robinson in any case. Felicia Scorpio has also given Curtis an update regarding Jacinda. Weekly General Hospital spoilers. Rocco's horror and shock, Drew's newest plan, Port Charles odds and ends. Rick Lansing invites Elizabeth Weber to something we know Ava Jerome won't accept. Cody Bell is still pursuing Christina Corinthos Davis's plan to woo Ava, nevertheless. Portia Robinson is also caught up with by Liz. At last, Sasha Corbin is about to uncover something terrible. Did someone do something odd in the baby's nursery again? Or does she discover Daisy is gone? Daisy is obviously being pursued. Or is someone merely attempting to make poor Sasha go mad once more? After Danny initially discovered Brooke Lynn's files and presented them to Rocco more than a week ago, confounding the buddy he considers a brother, Lulu had to give a serious explanation. Britt Westbourne is listed as his mother on one of the 2 birth certificates that Rocco sees. Emma advised Rocco to simply ask his parents for the truth, even though she tried her best to explain things that she was unable to fully comprehend as a young child. When Rocco introduces the name Britt Westbourne, Lulu is taken aback. Lulu never imagined that she would have to explain Rocco's origins to him. At the very least, she might have preferred to wait until he was an adult and could comprehend more fully. General Hospital's Lulu is shocked and unsure of how to respond. Image. ABC: The moment of truth has arrived, and this preview video shows it. Lulu must make a decision. She informs Rocco that she is going to call Dante's father, since she knows right away that she will need him as backup. But Rocco stops her and demands immediate answers. He queries whether Britt was his biological mother. Lulu will have to clarify that although she is his mother, she did not bear him. After a string of bad luck, Britt managed to obtain Lulu's frozen embryo and implant it in herself in order to deceive Dr. Patrick Drake into believing she was expecting his kid. Before Dante and Lulu discovered the truth, Rocco was a few months old. Yes, Britt gave birth to a kid named Ben, but after Dante and Lulu took custody, they renamed him Rocco. Although Rocco will have a lot to process, Lulu will be incensed when she finds out how Rocco came to know this knowledge. Although she dislikes the thought of Brooklyn prying into her affairs, isn't that precisely what Lulu did to Brooklyn with Gio? Will these two women always be playing tit for tat? Cody gives Ava a kiss in the meantime, but is it genuine or merely a part of Christina's scheme? According to General Hospital spoilers, Cody Bell appears ready to plant a kiss on Ava Jerome. However, will this lip lock be genuine or only a ploy by Christina Corinthos Davis? Fans of GH are aware that when Cody signed up for this, he fought for hazard pay since he was initially concerned about Ava's troubling past. But it seems like Cody is beginning to see Ava's side, and might even be enjoying her company. It goes without saying that Cody still has feelings for Molly Lansing Davis and their relationship. In fact, Max Scorpio will play Cupid for the two in the upcoming weeks after noticing their bond. However, Cody has committed to this Ava plot and might keep trying to woo her. That might jeopardize Cody's developing relationship with Molly, particularly if the distinction between what is real and what is part of the story is beginning to become hazy. According to General Hospital spoilers, Ava and Cody are about to have a heated exchange. A sequence that draws Cody and Ava closer will occur sometime in July. Is it possible that Ava and Cody will go close enough to share a kiss? Ava and Cody might give in to a kiss, but Cody might experience some internal conflict as a result. There might be more going on here, even though Cody might convince himself it's only a portion of the task Christina assigned him. It's possible that Cody secretly wants to kiss Ava, and may find it difficult to move on from her thereafter. Stories with a seduction narrative like this one often get complicated and lead to genuine emotions, which may be what's going on with Cody. Regretfully, Cody might come to regret his engagement with Ava altogether. Ava might become enraged with Cody after learning that he is working for Christina, in addition to perhaps destroying their relationship with Molly. According to General Hospital spoilers, Ava will eventually receive news, so don't miss her furious response and the mayhem it may cause. General Hospital spoilers for Monday, July 7, 2025 include Jocelyn's deceit, Laura's shock, Sasha's horror, and Sidwell's meltdown. Fans should anticipate a terrifying revelation from Sasha Gilmore Corbin. As Anna Devane questions Jen Sidwell, he engages in blame shifting. Let's discuss the upcoming developments in the ABC soap drama as you continue reading. Let's begin with Jen Sidwell's blame game. Sidwell and Sonny Corinthos are engaged in a mob war. Innocent individuals will be caught in the crossfire as the two retaliate against one another. In addition to the fire that almost killed Christina Corinthos Davis, there is the death of Natalia Ramirez. Sidwell loses his temper as Anna approaches him to ask him some questions. Sidwell orders the police commissioner to go speak with Sonny in an abrasive manner. Laura Collins and Sonny are meeting in the interim. The mob boss informs the mayor that he might have a method to limit the damage in a sneak peek at the upcoming episode. Lulu Spencer is confronted by Rocco Falconeri. According to General Hospital spoilers for Monday, July 7th. The adolescent asks his mother about Britt Westbourne's surrogacy dilemma. Britt's homecoming seems more likely to be a flashback to Rocco's major plot point. Following the altercation, Lulu will be furious. She will undoubtedly direct her attention toward Brooklyn Quartermain. In reference to her conflict with Lulu, BLQ informs Cody Bell that one of them must be the bigger person. The brunette will most likely deny any involvement in the information being shared when Lulu attacks BLQ. Lulu is the kind of person who would manage to extract it from Marco Rios. Marco won't be performing at his best because he is still suffering the loss of his mother. Fans will also witness Sasha's terrifying revelation on Monday, July 7, 2025. Does Daisy Gilmore Corbin have anything to do with this? Let's watch how this plot develops as someone is playing with Sasha's thoughts and her unborn child. In fact, I'm shocked that Cody didn't volunteer to look in the baby's room as a precaution. Giovanni Palmieri is looking for a fresh viewpoint. Gio will speak with Carly Spencer as well. Jocelyn Jacks also informs Vaughn that they are finished. On Monday, July 7, 2025, which narrative are you most excited to see? Post your ideas in the space provided for comments below. To find out what happens next, keep watching the ABC soap opera. Make sure you keep up with all that's going on with GH at the moment. For news, updates, and spoilers about General Hospital, return here frequently. Although Rocco had always been a stubborn child, Dante and Lulu were unable to deny the change in recent weeks. He had changed, and despite their best efforts to identify it, friends, school pressure, his position in the intricate Spencer Falconeri family web, none of their conversations got very far. Rocco remained silent. He was disappearing as he was closing off. The terror struck quickly. Dante had been in the precinct one moment, wrapping up a report. The following day Lulu had called in that trembling voice he would never forget, saying the words he dreaded the most. Rocco's missing. At first, they believed he might have wandered off in frustration or gone to see a friend. However, hours passed and nothing was found. No phone calls. No sightings. The quiet was overwhelming. Dante entered full detective mode, making feelers and requesting favors. Lulu followed her instincts and looked at the familiar locations, including Maxie's apartment, Kelly's, and the park where they used to take him. However, Rocco was nowhere to be seen. Worry gave way to dread as the sun disappeared behind the hills outside Port Charles. Suddenly, the shadows of the town appeared darker. A lost child was a distinct type of fear in a community where lies and secrets festered every day. However, someone had been listening. The previous time they had met at the Quartermain home, Gio had detected a restlessness in Rocco's gaze. Rocco appeared to be about to speak, but he always stopped as someone approached. Gio had blamed it on family strife. The Falconeri inheritance was complicated, after all. Lulu's troubled past, Dante's life as a police officer, and the lingering Spencer name all had their own significance. Gio, however, was now unable to ignore the signs. He was attempting to piece things together as he stood outside the Metro Court, gazing out over Port Charles. Although they were not very close, he and Rocco shared a thin link because they were both the offspring of siblings who had seen more than was appropriate for their age. Gio was familiar with the sense of suffocation that comes from being constrained by the expectations of others. Perhaps that was the reason Rocco fled. He hesitated and flipped his phone over in his fingers. He then gave Dante a call. After a brief pause, the person on the other end of the telephone said, "I believe I know where Rocco went." "Where?" "I'm not sure precisely, but I've made a guess." Dante paused. "I need your trust." Despite his desperation, he was aware of Joe's propensity for impatience. Nevertheless, he had a gut feeling that this was their best chance. "Go." Gio hung up and started to move. "Call me as soon as you find anything." He began with the waterfront, a location that children usually consider daring and somewhat perilous, particularly at night. Gio headed first to the ancient boatyard near Pier 17, where he recalled Rocco previously remarked that it looked like a movie set. There was only the faint groan of water slamming against the piers and the sound of seagulls sobbing in the darkness. Nothing. He then looked over the rail yard where the freight trains went. A child attempting to flee might find such a location appealing. Again, however, there is no sign. Even so, Gio sensed his approach. In his mind, he went back to where he had been when he was younger and asked himself, where would I go if I was angry, sad, confused, and wanted out? Then it struck him. Lulu had taken Rocco and Gio to a family cottage outside of town years ago. It was a dilapidated place, more of a relic than a destination. Rocco had cherished the place. He referred to it as his secret hideout. Perhaps he recalled it similarly to Gio, peaceful, isolated, and completely different from the chaos of Port Charles. Gio rode his borrowed motorcycle across gravel paths and back roads for more than an hour to reach the destination. There was the slightest trace of smoke drifting from the chimney, and the cabin was as deserted as ever. His heart pounded. There was a person inside. He moved cautiously and gently up. There was an open front door. He pushed it open and entered the darkened room. Rocco? The boy, clad in an old blanket, flinched from the couch. His cheeks were marred by tears, and his eyes were crimson. In that moment he appeared much smaller than Gio remembered, only a scared child who had finally crumbled under the pressure of too much. With his eyes darting up to meet his, Rocco murmured softly, "I knew someone would come." Gio let out a breath of relief. "Everyone was terrified by you." "I didn't mean to," Rocco muttered, tucking himself more beneath the blanket. "I simply had to leave." Gio pulled up a wobbly chair and said, "No one listens anymore. Now I'm paying attention." At first, the words came out slowly, but then, "Talk to me." Rocco acknowledged that he felt invisible, and that everything revolved around his parents' requirements or expectations. Due to his employment obligations, Dante had been more of a cop than a father lately. Always affectionate, Lulu had become entangled in the Spencer family's drama, which Rocco found incomprehensible. Then there was the pressure from school and the rumors about his family's history, Falmeri this, Spencer that. There were expectations even for teachers. With his hands clenched he declared, "I'm sick of being a part of a story I didn't choose." Gio gave a nod. Indeed. The fire crackled low as they sat in silence for a little more. "I know that one," Rocco went on. "I guess I messed everything up." "No. You required room. You ought to have informed someone, but I understand why you didn't. I didn't think anyone would show enough interest to pay attention." "I do," Gio muttered. "And your parents? Right now they're going crazy." Joe's throat constricted as he said, "I just didn't want to disappoint them. They love you more than you realize." Dante came to mind, a man who carried the shame of every case, every setback, and every life he was unable to save. And Lulu, whose heart broke every time her child suffered because it was too big for the world. Although Rocco hadn't seen it yet, he will. "Everyone makes mistakes," Gio remarked. Rocco gazed at the fire and said, "What matters is what we do after." "You believe they'll be upset?" "Perhaps. More like scared. However, they'll be so happy you're all right that they won't care about anything else." A lengthy silence. "Will you accompany me back?" Gio got up. "Indeed. Let's head home." Dawn was breaking when they returned to Port Charles. Fear eating at them, Dante and Lulu had hardly slept, walking back and forth between their house and the police station. Dante's voice broke when Gio called. The sight of Rocco in the doorway brought Lulu to tears, and she seized him in a shuddering embrace. Reaching down, Dante took his son by the shoulders. "Never repeat that action." Rocco nodded, speechless as waves of shame swept over him. Dante, however, drew him close and held him. Gio, uncertain of his position at the time, observed from the sidelines and said, "I'm just glad you're okay." With tears still in her eyes, Lulu turned and walked across the room. "You brought him back." "Thank you." Gio scratched his head and remarked, "I didn't do much." She responded, "You did exactly what he needed. He just needed someone to listen." And what we needed. After informing the police and canceling the search, news quickly circulated across Port Charles that Rocco had been located. There were no press releases or major announcements. Only relief. Gio sat by himself on the terrace of Courtemain later that afternoon, gazing out over the town. Brooklyn sat down next to him in silence. She whispered, "You did something amazing. You saw what no one else saw." "I just found a scared kid." "That's important," Gio said, shaking his head. "I believe I understand now. The reasons behind Dante's behavior. Why does Lulu always observe this family?" "No, it's not easy," Brooklyn concurred. "But you stepped up." He remained silent for a while before continuing. "I just didn't want him to feel alone. I've been there. It's awful." Brooklyn extended her hand and squeezed it. "Well, you're not alone either." Gio felt a calmness that had been absent for a long time shift in his chest. Rocco came to find him that evening. Rocco remarked, "I never said thank you." "You don't have to." "I do." "You arrived. That had significance." Gio gave a small smile. "You would do the same for me." "Perhaps," Rocco smiled. "Join the club. If I ever figure things out." Gio chuckled. Over the next few days, Rocco went back to school. He was enrolled in a youth counseling group by Dante and Lulu. They made it possible to have genuine conversations at home, and Rocco began composing poetry, short stories, and everything else he could to deal with the internal turmoil. One occasion, Lulu even discovered him reading aloud to an empty room something he had written. She didn't speak out. She simply listened. Gio remained nearby, observing from the periphery rather than hovering. He was aware that he had changed things. It was nice to be the one someone else could rely on rather than the one in distress for once. Not everything was resolved by the story. There were still many secrets in Port Charles. However, two brothers had developed a kinship that was not based on blood, but rather on their common experience of being lost and deciding to find their way back. Rocco never thought his world would fall apart like way. It was becoming clear that all he thought he knew about the people in his life was a meticulously constructed fiction. He was initially shaken when he heard his mother's whispered phone call. There was an odd urgency in her voice that made him uneasy. He didn't intend to hear. He was on his way to the kitchen for a glass of water, just by her room. He recognized that sound, though, and something in her tone had caused him to hesitate. It was the sound of danger, secrets, and the truth concealed beneath polite speech. His intuition begged him to continue moving forward, to remain in the secure realm of ignorance. However, he didn't. He stayed long enough to hear unexpected names, most notably Drew's name. Initially, he was unable to understand it. Something his mother mentioned about a meeting that went awry and Drew's wild plans to do something bigger this time remained with Rocco like a splinter. What could be more significant than Drew's previous actions? Drew was always willing to step over boundaries when others wouldn't, and he had always operated in gray zones. Once Rocco had admired that. Drew had impressed him with his ability to complete tasks, and his ability to remain composed when faced with difficult decisions. However, as Rocco grew older, he became more aware of the flaws. Those fissures were now opening large. Later that day, he attempted to approach Drew and pretended to be inquisitive while posing questions. Drew flashed that effortless, well-groomed smile that he always had while deflecting. However, the grin did not extend to his eyes. Rocco was filled with a sluggish, creeping dread. Drew should have recognized that he was no longer a youngster. He was able to see through the facade. Drew was lying. He had a serious secret. Worse, he was almost arrogant about it. Not all of the truth was revealed at once. It came to him piece by piece like a puzzle without a box image to help him figure it out. Another conversation that Rocco heard was between Drew and an unfamiliar woman. Drew brought up names Rocco had never heard of before. Operatives, associates, and people from beyond Port Charles who owed Drew favors, and they were fighting over money, resources, and what he called the pivot. Whatever the strategy was, it was already underway. Furthermore, it wasn't about justice based on Drew's speech. It had to do with power. When Rocco made the connection, his dread grew. Drew was creating his own system, not only operating outside of it. There was rumors of blackmail files being surreptitiously compiled on important Port Charles individuals, and of monitoring technology being smuggled into the city. Although he had always known Drew was ambitious, this was not it. Obsession was what this was. It was also risky. He was no longer able to keep it to himself. It was excessively heavy. He then proceeded to Dante. It felt wrong to tell his father, like he was betraying someone who had once been his surrogate uncle. However, he was at a loss. Dante didn't respond as Rocco had anticipated. His eyes were grim confirmation, not astonishment. More than anything else, that shook Rocco. Dante was aware already. Perhaps not the whole picture, but enough to believe Drew was no longer operating under the same guidelines. After Rocco explained everything, Dante remarked quietly, "He's trying to build a failsafe." Rocco felt nauseous. Something that keeps him in control, no matter what happens next. "Why?" Dante answered. "Because he doesn't trust anyone. Not the people around him, not the system. He believes that he is the only one who can keep the ones he loves safe. However, he is acting in the opposite way." It didn't end there. When Rocco learned that Michael was Drew's next target, his terror turned to rage. His relative. His companion. In order to hide Drew's more sinister actions behind a facade of respectability, he had been preparing Michael to take over the legal aspect of the business. Michael was unaware. Rocco didn't believe he did anyway. Everything was worse than he had thought if he did. Rocco made the decision to speak with Michael. He discovered him working late at the Quartermain estate by himself. It was a heated exchange. Rocco outlined every unpleasant suspicion and piece of breadcrumb he had followed. Unable to interpret his face, Michael listened. "You believe I'm unaware of Drew's identity?" At last, Michael murmured in a hushed voice. "I do. However, I believed I could guide him." Rocco's hands clenched into fists as he thought, "Perhaps if I stayed close, I could keep him from going too far." "You were mistaken. He has overreached himself. And now you're involved." Michael's face remained unchanged. "I'm working to make it better. But if you blast this open, I can't do that." Rocco's rage flared. "You want me to keep quiet then? Just so you may keep your place at the table, let him take down everyone he wants?" Michael responded softly, "No. I want your trust." But Rocco didn't give it. No more. The days that followed went so quickly. Rocco was unable to sleep, unable to concentrate. He was avoiding the individuals he used to confide in as he wandered the streets of Port Charles. Olivia was too preoccupied with handling family issues and Lulu was out of town to notice the weight in his eyes. He felt isolated. He made the error of going straight up to Drew at that point. It took place late at night at Pier 55. Drew had left a meeting in the Metro Court, and Rocco had followed him. He only needed to look Drew in the eye and hear him acknowledge it. He had no idea what he was going to do. When Drew saw Rocco coming, he didn't flinch. He nearly appeared amused, in fact. "Rocco," he remarked kindly, as though they were reuniting as old friends. "How come you're out here?" "You understand why I'm here," Rocco retorted. Drew's face became tense. "Have you not been listening in? I am aware of the files, the monitoring. The pivot is known to me," Drew sighed. Rocco remarked, "I understand enough. You don't understand the full picture. No one is being protected by you. You're in charge of them." Drew didn't refute it. Sometimes the only thing that keeps people safe is control. "Rocco, the world is more sinister than you think." Rocco shook his head. "I'm just making sure we survive it." "You sound like a bad movie villain." "Perhaps," Drew said. "However, bad guys do win sometimes." The most frank and horrifying thing Drew had ever said to him was, "And when they do, they write the next chapter." That night, Rocco was more shaken than ever. He was unsure of whom to ask. He had compromised everyone he trusted. Drew had mastered the art of avoiding bureaucratic shackles, and even Dante appeared helpless. The web had grown too large and complex. Drew had sown seeds in the media, in law enforcement, and in politics. Dissent had no place in the future he was creating. Could only be controlled. Rocco considered going out of town. Simply vanishing, severing connections with everything. But he couldn't let go of anything inside of him. His blood was too Quartermain, and his tenacity was too Spencer. There was no running. He began to delve further and establish connections with those on the periphery, including former reporters, whistleblowers, and those who had attempted to reveal wrongdoing in Port Charles but had been punished. He was chilled by what he discovered. Drew's influence went much beyond the city. He was connected to private spy agencies, shadow networks, and companies with dubious government contracts. Port Charles was only the start. Rocco realized what he needed to do at that point. He had to set everything on fire. He couldn't accomplish it by himself, though. He made contact with Valentine, the one person he hadn't trusted in years. Valentine detested unbridled authority more than anyone, but it was a risk. He had his own past with men like Drew and his own motives. To Rocco's astonishment, he consented to assist. Together, they started to surgically and silently construct a case. They gathered information and testimonies from those who were too scared to speak in public. They followed the money's path, the transactions that were not on file, and the digital traces that Drew believed he had deleted. They intended to destroy everything, not just expose him. However, time was running short. Drew was making plans faster. He had started eliminating everybody he believed would be disloyal. Rocco watched in terror as influential people he had known his entire life were abruptly gone. A few were taken into custody,